All right, Wiz, a lot of people have been asking us for a long time, multimodal RAG. And here we are doing it today. Turns out you were right. It's actually kind of a little bit complex to kind of break down into its constituent parts. There's a lot going on with multimodal RAG, it turns out.
Yeah, there's a ton. And I think, we're on the path to multimodal RAG today. We're starting our journey. There's a ton of context that needs to be set, and we'll get the first step done, but we're certainly not going to be fully multimodal by the end of today.
Yeah, and I think in the year of agents and the year of context engineering, like it really can be simplified a bit. It's like, what data would you really just love to be able to put in context? And then to the extent that multimodal RAG, multimodal agentic RAG, whatever we want to call it, can serve that outcome, I think it's going to be a useful tool to pick up. But we're far from like kind of being able to say, here are the general best practices for multimodal RAG. It's kind of just a dark pit. You got to fall down and, you got to understand your data. You got to understand what you want to do with it. And it almost feels like once you get to production or something, you're just deep in it depends land.
Yeah, multimodal RAG is like RAG, but with multiple modalities, right? And I think that's we don't spend a lot of time at AI Makerspace talking about multiple modalities, right? We tend to restrict ourselves to text, and so there's a whole world we have to open up before we can even begin to understand what's the next step.
Yeah, and it does feel like the industry is just about ready for some of this stuff. I get people asking me all the time. We get students asking us, hey, what about the PDFs that are more complex? Not just tables and charts anymore, but people are often asking about images. A lot of people are asking now, certainly from our classes, about voice and adding different modalities, both being able to understand those modalities, being able to store and retrieve those modalities, being able to generate those modalities. It hits like all aspects of the stack. And we're just going to focus today on retrieval augmented generation, but it really does open up a whole world that I'm excited to explore in 2026.
Exactly. So, it's, there's also a lot of discussion that we can have around where does the modality live in the pipeline? And, is it like voice where it makes it easier to interact with, or is it like images where we're using the raw images to do the search, right? So there's just so much space here that we can explore.
Yeah, and then once you get one modality and another modality and they're connected, then just the simple way you might do retrieval, like based on that modality to find that other modality is just like really, it starts to really explode. So I'm excited to give this quick overview today. We've got a tool we're going to show. This is olmOCR, and this
olmOCR
is number 2. This came out last month. And, I just thought this was kind of a cool tool that came out. AllenAI Institute is very, very open about their training process and about everything they went through to do this. A lot of tools have OCR capabilities, but this is kind of a state-of-the-art open one. We're going to take a deep look at it, and we're going to see what it can do today. And we're going to see where it fits into the multimodal RAG landscape. More to come, but I'm excited to contextualize this for everybody, have some great discussions today, and kick this thing off. You ready to go?
Couldn't be more ready.
All right, let's get into it then, everybody. Today, we're talking multimodal RAG. If you do have comments along the way, you want to jump into the discussion, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this and what you find most valuable as we get into it. Okay, aligning our aim to today, we really just have a big question we want to answer, which is, what is multimodal RAG? And then we want to dig into this one tool. It's nice to give overview and generalizations, but it's also probably more valuable to go deep on one specific thing and then expand out from there. So we're going to try to do a little bit of both today. We'll build kind of a multimodal RAG application. You'll see what we mean by that as we go along here. It's been clear this year that agents are kind of becoming first-class citizens. RAG started out the year very strong. And I really think that this multimodality is going to continue to become more and more of a staple and mainstay for people building agents, I guess we would say, into 2026. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Multimodal RAG. Multimodal, when we're talking about language models, just means that we can process and understand information from multiple types of data: text, images, audio, whatever it may be. And of course, we know what RAG is. It's retrieval augmented generation. Okay. I found an article from, gosh, this must be like over a year old, but it was a great article from NVIDIA. I think it was called An Easy Introduction to Multimodal RAG. And I like the breakdown, and we'll see how it comes together with some of our thoughts specifically. A RAG application has exponentially higher utility if it can work with a wide variety of data types. Okay, great. And so, one of the great figures from the article here is this one, and this idea of increasing degree of concisely expressible information. It's kind of like that idea of when you take an image, how much information about what's actually happening are you really capturing? And this probably gets more towards, the more extensive world modeling being talked about a lot out there today. But we're just going to stick with the idea that this is probably easier to concisely express what's going on, but a lot of PDFs these days will have things like this. They break down three approaches. One is the approach where we want to embed all modalities into the same vector space. Another one is we want to kind of ground all modalities into one primary modality, let's say text. And the final one is just literally separate them into two different stores, combine them back later. And this is, again, just with two modalities. So you can imagine how this kind of expands out even just with these three sets of thinking about it. Now, let's say we wanted to embed all modalities into one sort of combined vector space. This is a sort of clip or vision transformer type of approach. This is not new technology. This has been out for a long time, but this is the idea that you can just kind of use a model that can encode both text and images. Let's just stick with those for now and for today, into the same vector space. This is going to be quite useful if you're trying to really understand and grok what's going on inside of images. This simplifies the pipeline to be able to be a little bit more flexible in its direct retrieval. But the trade-off here is that if you have very, very intricate kind of text contained in images, so like, classically we could see examples like, I think the examples we covered, I think last year when we did complex RAG for PDFs were kind of these types of tables you would see in financial filing documents. This ultimately, if it's in a PDF, is kind of an image. The portable document format was meant to be printed out. So it's kind of has to be viewed digitally as an image. And when you have this shared embedding space, it's a little bit harder to be very, very specific that you're looking for text here and you're looking to retrieve text. The second example where we kind of ground everything in one primary mode, this might be the idea that you just simply use the captions of the image to kind of retrieve the right information. If the caption is going to nail the similarity search, I'm going to give you the image as well. And so this might kind of mainly revolve around kind of text-based Q&A, where then you're just returning the image. But you could also, and people have done this a lot, and this is actually, the image I took here is from a paper that's actually using the kind of generate captions using a RAG approach. But this is kind of the idea of we're kind of just using text to get access to the other modality. You could imagine if you had text descriptions of audio files, for instance, you could do something similar. And then finally, the kind of different store approach is, let's say you create a vector store of images, you create a vector store of text, and then you might actually do a multimodal re-ranking. I looked today, and on the text embedding benchmark leaderboard, Voyage AI is kind of crushing it on both image and text in English, the Voyage 3, and then multimodal, and then also on the retrieval piece, on the retrieval text embedding benchmark. So this is kind of the idea that you've got kind of, let's say, 10 returns from text, 10 returned from images, and you want to kind of re-rank them all together as most relevant to the query in one final step. This, of course, can become a little computationally expensive because you've got a lot of different kind of LLMs that you're leveraging to make the decision ultimately and finally. And so these three approaches are kind of one way we can think about multimodal RAG, but we can break it down even more simply than that. Let's just think about RAG like ridiculously simply. We just want to basically build a pipeline that retrieves information about some query, puts that relevant information into context, and then we generate a response. And if we think about RAG in this way, we can kind of talk about multimodal RAG without changing the definition at all. We're simply retrieving information about some query. We're putting that relevant information into context, and we're generating a response. So as we think about multimodal RAG, we can kind of think about taking RAG to the next level. It's not so much about avoiding hallucinations as we might have classically thought about RAG. It's not really even about things being false or us ensuring that we're going to be confident. It's more about just kind of leveraging all relevant information in our responses. It's just about kind of getting great responses. And this is totally aligned with the classic idea of RAG in the first place, where it's serving the end user in our application. The user provides some query. We want to give a great output. And if we have access to other data that could make the output even more great, maybe we should leverage it. And maybe those are different modalities of information. But if I had a human at the helm doing the retrieval, they might go pick up that information. And so how can we automate that? And maybe we can use multimodal LLMs to do so. The retrieval and the generation process, of course, can both generally be optimized, but we're often focused on the retrieval step. And that's also what we're kind of focused on here. RAG is all about just giving the LLM access to new knowledge. And LLM here, we can sort of expand the idea that we're thinking about the term as a multimodal LLM, as all VLMs are LLMs, and so on. And so we might introduce classic as a helpful term here. Classic RAG might be thinking about using dense vector retrieval and putting stuff in context. It's going to indicate that we're going to search our data for stuff that's similar to our queries. It's going to indicate that we're going to leverage a mapping of our data and our queries to an embedding space. And we could extend this idea of classic RAG to sort of a classic sort of multimodal RAG now, where if we're still going after text, but we're using a tool that's going to help us extract text from images. And this is essentially what we're going to look at today. This is a tool like olmOCR is going to do for us. It's going to be able to read very complex, optical character recognition. Here is just about recognizing the characters and the text in whatever data I've got here. Typically, we're thinking about this as optical images, okay? Things I can see. So I can go from RAG to classic multimodal RAG, and I can extend this even further as I think about kind of taking the idea of classic multimodal RAG to the next level, where I'm not just kind of extracting text from images, but I'm actually doing more of a true multimodal retrieval. This is going to be something where I'm using more of a shared embedding space, right? And I'm using something more like a tool that you might see like Poly. This is about using vision language models more directly to be able to do retrieval kind of more directly. And you'll notice kind of standard retrieval leveraging OCR here. Poly is kind of quartering the page into vision and kind of doing it in a much more direct, more sort of true to form, kind of true multimodal retrieval piece here. And this is the one that we covered when we covered the multimodality with Llama 3.2 earlier this year on this channel. We covered this one in some detail. Now, it doesn't stop there, because we're in this world where RAG could also mean agentic RAG. So it doesn't have to mean classic RAG. And when we think about just doing retrieval, and we think about the world of agents that we live in now, this is just about giving the LLM access to tools. And so when we think about doing now agentic multimodal RAG, we're giving the LLM access to new knowledge through tools. And now those tools can just be used to look at images. They can be used to assess and understand images. They can be used for all sorts of different things. And when we think about kind of just sending our agent to some tool to help us with something, we might also start to think about, well, what if I have kind of ChatGPT or OpenAI set up to kind of assess all of my company's docs already? Like, if I think about agentic multimodal RAG, of course, like if you've used GPT 4 or 5, like those are multimodal models under the hood. Like we might say, like, can't all big models do this agentic multimodal RAG today? In any case, we're still doing kind of the same thing. We're doing retrieval. We're trying to get the good stuff, to put it into context, to do the generation. We're connecting users to the information that we know they're going to need through our app. The retrieval piece is simple in theory and really, somewhat in practice. You ask a question, we search for relevant stuff, we return the stuff into context. We had talked about this in a previous event as kind of two stages that we can now expand on just a little bit. We could think about one as kind of parsing the documents, and we could think about one as kind of understanding the documents. And the example we had was like, if you look at any given model, say Llama 2 or olmOCR or Poly, they're going to kind of be focused on one or the other today. And you can kind of think about this more generally as the parsing, the chunking, the creation of the data store the creation of the data resource that we're going to use for retrieval. And then we can think about the retrieval, the understanding, the sort of being able to actually go get the stuff and create the context, the resource that we're going to use to put in context, and we're going to use to do the engineering here to get the better output. So with that, let's maybe recap together, Wiz, here. We've got kind of a lot of terms we've introduced here. And I think I would shout out to the chat. Like, if you know of other tools you're excited about in this space, let us know. See, Don's talking about LangAI, certainly other folks coming in from the image side. There's a lot of ways we can think about this, but to me, it just gets back down to like, are we just being data centric again, where we're kind of not focused so much on the models? They're just all powerful enough, and now we kind of have to go back to our data. Like, or is there more happening here that you're seeing?
I think so. You know, when it comes to the kind of world of multimodal as it's been kind of, you know, happening in the last, 2 years alongside text or whatever, I think we're just trying to understand what's the best way to tie all of these disparate things together, right? So, like text, I think for not a long time, because there hasn't really been a long time yet in modern AI, but for as long as we, maybe until a year or two ago, right, we really just wanted to force everything to text and not care about like the native modality. And I think more and more now we're seeing technologies that care more and more deeply about native modality. So, uh, literally the image versus stuff that we extract from the image, or like a description of the image, right? And that's obviously more powerful. You know what I mean? I mean, there's like this a picture's worth 1,000 words idiom that we use as human, or 1,000 words that we use as humans, right? But I mean, it's really true in the sense of, if we can capture information from exactly the image directly, it's going to be better than if we just like describe it, with some, even if it's a complex and robust process.
Yeah, and I'm kind of struck by, like, I mean, even these advanced ideas that we have with text, like contextual retrieval, and we're sort of adding context, we're summarizing context, we're adding all the right stuff, to be able to, like, again, go back and really optimize the context, engineer the context. Like, this whole world of like context engineering for multimodal seems to be quite nascent. At least it hasn't reached the levels of me hearing about it very often yet. And so, like, what does the contextual retrieval of of an image look like in 2026, or of what does it look like? What does it look like in a video, right, in 2027 and beyond? These are quite interesting kind of retrieval questions. And now that we know all this stuff about context engineering, maybe we can, we all have to kind of be data engineers again or something, is kind of, again, I just go back to this, it feels very data centric. ML, the models are good, guys. What are we doing now? And it's like, well, we should really focus on, the stuff that's going to move the needle for us. And it seems like multimodal pushes us back to data. Is that the way you see it?
I don't know. So I think obviously it is correct to say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, obviously it's correct to say, yes. I mean, data is still the most important piece of the puzzle. If you think anything else, then you're in for a tough surprise. You know what I mean? But what I would also maybe say is that it's like the data engineering is the best framing for it, for sure, right? Because data engineering implies, in some sense, that we have this distinction where we're needing to tie different data formats or modalities together. And I think that resonates as very true. You know, we're not like more data centric than RAG was, though, like comparatively, like text only RAG, right? I don't think that's a way to, like, there's not a relative moreness, you know, in multimodal about data centrism, but certainly the data engineering pipelines are more advanced. They require more technologies, right? All of these things, yes, absolutely true. And insofar as that's the case, then I would agree. I would largely agree that RAG ties us to this data paradigm, and I don't think that's changing in with multimodal RAG.
I mean, there's so much to potentially discuss here, but I guess I want to kind of guide the discussion towards like do we have any inkling of, you know, like, let's say 2026, 2027, people think, okay, we got to do retrieval in all the modalities, but ultimately, like, we produce the best results if we do the generations where everything's been synthesized back to text or something. Like there's some sort of, like, almost the way we write reports now. We have to one shot it at the end. And however we do that, maybe it's to a multimodal model, but maybe it's not. Do you have any sense of sort of best practices that exist today and how things have been evolving over the last year? I know you're quite close to the models, a lot closer than we often cover on this channel. And I just want to kind of open it up to any sort of best practices you might offer AI engineers today that aren't that familiar necessarily with the models, but are excited to build these kind of pipelines.
Yeah, I mean, the best practice is you need to spend time thinking about how you're getting all of your different data formats to talk to each other and how you're going to talk to those data formats. Best practices include things like, don't, you know, we're going to showcase something called olmOCR today, right? And it is going to do one task really well. I would say, like, don't just rely on that one task. I mean, Greg and I had a really great conversation beforehand trying to figure out exactly, you know, there's a lot of little needly points about multimodal RAG, right? And I think one of the things that is true is that you do want to bring like a multi-tool setup to multimodality. You don't just want to use OCR. You don't just want to use and trust the VLM, right? These are specialist tools, and more so than the modality of text, which realistically is quite simple, right? I mean, it's just text, you know, and all the different kinds of text files, you know, they may change some things about the representation of text, but it's like not a lot, right? Like a Word doc can be perfectly translated to, you know, to Notepad in terms of the actual content. The structures, it may be lost, but the content's coming along for the ride, right? This is not as true for images, and so we need many specialized tools versus text, where we can kind of just raw dog the actual text into the LLM at the end of the day. And so, you know, a best practice is spend more time thinking about what the right kind of tool for the job is, right? Do I need extraction of text? Do I need to retain structure? Do I care about what the image is about versus, you know, do I care about the colors in the images, right? Is it something that my users might want to say, well, what are other red things, right? And so this is, all of these are questions that have specific tools that we're going to find that the RAG ocean is deep. And, you know, maybe multimodal RAG is like more towards the Marianas Trench, Challenger Deep side of the ocean than like kind of 50 miles off the coast of Florida, right? So that's
right. That's
but
right.
It's all the same ocean. It's just the level of depth.
Yeah, but is it though? I mean, because like the thing to me that strikes me is if enterprise comes to me today, a consulting client comes to me today, and they say, I'm not sure what I should build. Let's figure it out. I'm going to say, stay away from multimodal. 100%. Like, just do text and get the low-hanging fruit. If you can't get that working, like, it seems to me it's something like there's not a, is this technically feasible question that needs to be asked about text only. It's more of an implementation question. It's more of a user experience question and less of a risk of not being able to do it technically. And it sort of reminds me of when I was doing AI consulting in the 2010s. And, there was always this question of, well, I don't know if the tools can do that yet. And I just feel like that's the way multimodal feels today to me at sort of the product scoping level. And I don't know, is that a fair analogy from what you're seeing inside models these days? Or basically there's no, if you say, I want my people to see red, it's like, okay, well, most things are doable today with the mod. Like that was kind of the discussion Ilya was having on the pod, that released yesterday. Is like the models are so good, we can kind of do a lot of stuff with them, and people just don't really know it yet. Which side do you fall on?
I mean, there's a reason Ilya's the GOAT. I mean, I mean, I don't love everything about the pod, but the idea of the idea that we have that we live in this world where models can basically do everything, as long as that thing is a rather small focused task, it feels very true.
Okay.
And our image models are incredibly powerful. Even the open source image models are really good, right? Our audio models are astounding. There's so much that we can do with models today. It is just finding the right concoction or blend or whatever, however you want to think about it, of these tools to build a system that does exactly and only precisely what you want. And for a task like what we typically see people using RAG for, which is Q&A. I mean, the models have well surpassed the threshold for quality in my opinion, right? We're not in the world where like the model's the thing that's wrong 90% of the time. The context is wrong. Sure. We don't feed it the right information and so it's wrong. Yes. But like the model itself, it can all be washed away with the correct context.
Yeah. And so you mentioned models. Okay. So last part of this discussion here, which models should we be thinking about? You mentioned the great image models, the great, voice models. Like, what are you paying attention to? And, I mean, if we contextualize this first with like, if we were to say which models are worth paying attention to in the LLM text space, it's like there's lots. So presumably there's lots, but like what's made it to the top of your sort of reading list and attending to list?
All of the same companies that produce your favorite LLMs are also producing vision language models, right? And some of them are also producing audio or omni models, right? I'm still looking at things like Quen. I still think that, there obviously Team Green exists and is doing a lot of different kinds of models.
Yeah.
It is the case that there are so many there are so many incredible models being produced all the time by every company that, like, if you have a favorite LLM company, they're almost certainly also producing some kind of vision language model that you can use.
It's becoming table stakes for them. They've got to do it to keep up.
Yeah. In terms of like focus on specifically multimodal RAG, I mean, this is, I think Cole Pally and related efforts are still among my favorites for this space.
Where they're using a shared embedding space between text and images.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to get into more technical details on all things multimodal in the coming year, Wiz. But I think for now, just shout out to the chat. We are going to get to the they did a custom benchmark for olmOCR. We'll cover that, and then we'll talk more about alternatives to parsing after we get into our build today. So quick intro, and then we'll get into the build here, guys. Let's talk about olmOCR and the release briefly, and we'll get right into it. So we covered olmo a long time ago on this channel, the open language model. olmOCR 2 is their most recent end-to-end vision language approach. They're not calling it a VLM. And as we mentioned before, this is where we're going to focus in on getting text, but it's going to be from images. As they say in the blog release, PDFs are everywhere. Research articles, government filings, textbooks, financial statements, historical archives, turning them into trustworthy, structured text is foundational for search, analytics, accessibility, and downstream AI. Yet even strong OCR systems struggle with multi-column layouts, dense tables, math notation, and degraded scans. Can we do better? Let's check out this end-to-end vision language approach of olmOCR with the Wiz. Let's check it out.
All right. So yes, we're going to talk about olmOCR. It's a combination of olmo and OCR. That's what you get. Allen Institute creating a bunch of fantastic open models. I'm going to share my screen. We're actually going to look at the repo a little bit here and just get our bearings. The big thing that I want to focus on for this piece is that we are doing the actual, I would say like baby steps of this pattern, which is to say that we're talking about the boom, here we go. We're talking about the actual, conversion into text, right? So we're going to take some kind of image, right? And we're going to turn it into Markdown. And this is important because when we think about, I'll just zoom in a little bit there. When we think about the idea of multimodal RAG, there's many different manifestations that it can take. And this is kind of the most simple version. We're going to come back to this in the future and get deeper and deeper. But for right now, this is like the most basic form. We have some specialist model, and it's going to take our images and it's going to convert them back into our the paradigm that we care about, which is going to be text. You can use olmOCR to process images. I have here a beautiful image produced by the one and only Greg. This is, I just want to be very clear with you guys. I know what this says ahead of time, and I have literally no idea what Greg's written, because I asked him to be as messy as humanly possible, and he delivered. So this is what we see. The squiggle is got it. Something burr, and there we got an and. Okay, so let's see how olmOCR does. The turkey is a much more respectable bird and well a true original Native American. He is, besides, though a little vain and silly, Ben F. I mean, a lot of these words are correct, right? This is from I believe a Ben Franklin quote talking about the majestic bird that is the turkey. So we'll look at the original. I mean, the model basically rocked this task, right? So this is why we have specialist models, right? This is the idea of these specialist models. And someone asked in the chat, is this truly multimodal if all types are converted into text and text embeddings? And the answer is maybe, right? If multimodal is a gradient, right, from not at all multimodal to completely multimodal, I would say this resides on the gradient toward multimodal. Certainly not not multimodal because we're doing that processing from images. Anyway, the idea is olmOCR is great. This is pretty good. This is pretty good, translation of the chicken scratch. Okay, so this is olmOCR. This is the tool we're gonna use to build our RAG pipeline. The way we're gonna use it is actually through the Docker path. So what I'm gonna do is share my cursor tab. Oh, great point. Raphael has a great point in the chat, which is maybe it already knows the Ben F quote, and therefore it's able to more easily decipher it. Maybe we'll have Greg at some point write random musings in Chicken Scratch and see how well it does. But I'm confident it will still do a great job. Okay, so what we're gonna do is make this is a demo brought to you by me. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some PDFs that have a lot of information and tables and data, and we're going to convert those to Markdown format. And of course, what we're going to use is we're going to use some Dungeons and Dragons PDFs that have a lot of rich information where the formatting is of critical importance, right? So this is tables for levels, spells that are supposed to be segmented together, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the Docker image of the olmOCR, and we're just going to run that across our PDFs directory. So the thing we're going to do is literally pre-process this data, right? We're going to take the image data that's in PDF format, and we're going to convert that to text data into Markdown files. And we're going to do that on our GPU. So you can run this command and it's going to leverage your GPU and actually do this work. This should work as long as you have a GPU. If you don't have a GPU, then you'll need to use something like Ollama and take a slightly different path where you use a remote server, which is possible in olmOCR. So it's not like you can't do it, but if you don't have a GPU, you're gonna have to jump through a few more hoops. Once we have that data, you'll notice that in my folder here, I've already done this, and we have all of these different pieces of information, and most happily we have things like this, right, where we maintain or retain the structure of the tables and the information present in the actual document. This is, again, of critical importance when we go to consume this. And that's what we'll do now. We're going to use, of course, LangChain 1.0 because we did the event on it. And now everything going forward will be 1.0. We're going to grab our API keys, including our Langsmith key. Then we're going to do some classic document stuff. First thing we're going to do is we're going to load the Markdown files. And keep in mind that we don't need a specific, we got something going on here. I'm just going to go ahead and take those slides down, put that back up. What we're going to do is we're going to just take our PDFs and load them in, and that'll be that. Again, no conversion from PDF. We've already done that step with a specific tool, right? We've already taken any images and turned them into text. Then we're going to go ahead and do some splitting, classic. We're going to use Quadrant as our vector store. Nothing changed. LangChain 1.0 works well with Quadrant. We're going to make sure our retriever works. What are Warforged and racial traits? And then we can see, boom, it pulls snippets related to Warforged racial traits. And then we can build our RAG agent using create agent. Now, in order to do this, first we'll need to go ahead and we'll need to use create a tool out of our retrieval, or a retriever in this case. And you may think, hang on, isn't this a agentic RAG? Of course it is, right? It's 2020, end of 2025. All we do is agentic RAG, right? We don't do regular RAG anymore. It's out of fashion. I'm joking, of course. Please still use regular RAG when it makes the most sense. Finally, we can create the agent using create agent, and then we can test it out. What are the racial traits of Warforged? Then we get an answer, all about that. We can scroll it down. We can see all of the traits and what they do. That's great. I want to play a shifter character. What subraces are available and what are the shifting features? Again, we can ask this. We get a response. We can see exactly the information that we've requested. We love to see that. And then we can look at an example of a RAG chain where we're actually going to set this up as middleware. So what this does is it takes it takes our RAG chain, right? And then it creates middleware from it. And what this does is it allows us to, before we execute the request of the model, we inject the information. So this is similar to a standard RAG pipeline, right? Which is every time before we call our model, we're going to inject additional context into our prompt, right? This is the idea of how we can leverage middleware to do interesting and cool things. And then finally, we can test it out. And of course, it works as well. We love to see that. And you can try it out yourself as well in a notebook. But the big idea here is that we have this really straightforward idea. We have images, we have pictures, we have these PDF files. We convert them to text, and then we're back into text world. So to DF Ramirez's question, is this truly multimodal? I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer, but it certainly can interact with what started off as images, which is great. And again, we're just getting started. There's so much to cover in multimodal AI generally, including RAG. I'll pass you guys back to Dr. Greg, but before I do, of course, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe and ring the bell notification, all those things. We're live every Wednesday at this time. We love doing these events, and we'll, there you go. Back to Dr. Greg.
All right. Thanks, Wiz. And okay, so that was the demo for today, and we'll go ahead and dig a little bit deeper into olmOCR now. So thanks to Wiz for the multimodal. You kind of get why we're doing it in quotes there now, because we did talk about it, and it does matter whether it is technically or not, but we are leveraging optical to do this. And as a result, that's another modality. Back to the definitions. Okay, so the core innovation in this I thought was quite interesting, because it's kind of a core innovation we're seeing all over the place, was that they trained the olmOCR 2 model against verifiable rewards, verifiable correctness. And they developed this synthetic document pipeline to do this. And this is quite interesting. They sampled a bunch of real-world PDFs that had different types of challenging content. We'll look at some of that different types of content and get a feel for this benchmark. And then they used Claude Sonnet 4 to analyze the layout and re-render the pages in this clean HTML. That HTML was ultimately what they were able to use as the verifier in the sort of exact markdown target form. And this like exactness of result that was needed was the basis of doing this reinforcement learning. And as we've talked about on this channel before, this idea of being able to verify true correctness, not just sort of semantic similarity, but like true correctness. And of course, they use group relative policy optimization, where they could do this pass-fail for rewards from these unit tests they put together. And so this was not just done in a did it pass fail, but they also did it in sort of these auxiliary, even more correct kind of ways to really dial this in. So the pass fail on the unit test looked at things like table structure or equation accuracy or specific order of the way that the thing was read. And then some of the additional pieces that they were trying to verify were like end of sequence tokens and very consistent metadata extraction. So this sort of correctness of OCR was kind of cast into this framework very nicely. And, I think, Wiz, the thing that comes to mind here as we think more about reinforcement learning and this paradigm we're in of scaling compute for RL it seems to me that retrieval is quite a verifiable thing. Did we retrieve the thing we were trying to retrieve that a human would have retrieved? It's kind of, it seems quite verifiable, at least to me. And it seems like if we're not seeing it yet, we should expect to see more gains from this kind of axis of scaling, we might say, towards building more robust multimodal RAG systems. Is this consistent with the way you think about the space, or have we seen this already?
Yeah, we've seen this already. I mean, this is like, can our LVR solve the world's problems and bring us all joy and peace and prosperity? Probably not, right? But is it really good at these focused, verifiable tasks? Yes. Do we have an idea of how to verify retrieval? Yes. And so they're a match made in algorithm heaven.
Yeah. So it's just going to get better and better from here, the retrieval.
We hope so.
And so really, yeah, I mean, I guess it does come down to sort of, what do you think you need to retrieve and why for your users, for what they're looking for? So let's go to a couple questions related to this. The one from Raphael earlier. So this benchmark they put together for olmOCR2, tried to sort of make it harder than previous. And there were some previous benchmarks for OCR. Does anything stick out to you as, worth noting as novel in the work done by the AI2 team here?
No, I mean, they're doing this stuff. I mean, one of the things I really like about AI2 is they don't necessarily they don't necessarily care to innovate, in like a earth-shattering sense, but they produce a lot of extraordinarily good resources on how to do the kind of things that you would do if you were a frontier or close to frontier model shop, right? And so AI2 isn't isn't consistently breaking the space with their innovations, but they are consistently sharing every learning imaginable about what they did and how they did it, which is, in my opinion, pound for pound, much more useful than coming up with a couple breakthroughs, right? You can always kind of depend on them to show you exactly how they did it, show you exactly why they did it, what challenges they ran into, and how they got over those challenges. Is how I'd think about it.
Yeah, and I was struck by sort of their mission on being a little bit more engineering focused as well as research. I just wanted to kind of bring in, just what this data set actually looks like for people, just so we can kind of like get a feel for like the verifiableness of this, so even like math, they're putting into this very exact sequence that it's like, if you get it right, it's right, just like classic tests on school. And then you can kind of go to different types of things. So like old scans, they sort of have a specific thing they're looking for in the scan and verified. Okay, check, and I think you can kind of look through these different categories and get a feel for the types of things that this particular tool is good at. So if you want to build something that's also good at these things, then maybe this is a tool you think about putting into your agent's tool belt, or, that's sort of a way we might be able to easily conceptualize it and put it into the way we think about RAG today. Okay. And then finally, I think the additional question is on tooling here. When we think about tools like olmOCR that are doing this parsing, that are doing this chunking piece, that are doing this like extraction piece from the doc, what do you kind of see as alternatives people should be looking at today? Llama Parse, of course, we've talked about on this channel before. What else jumps out at you as worth noting these days?
Yeah, I mean, Nemotron Parse is another example of a model that just came out, and it's quite good at this kind of task. I would also say like a lot of the VLM models are pretty decent at OCR tasks. So if you don't want the additional complexity of having more than one model in the pipeline, then I would say you can usually lean on the VLMs to do an okay job at this. Otherwise, just stick with the classics. Even things like PyMu PDF are going to be
what a classic.
Are going to be like okay. I'm not going to suggest you're
is
gonna
that multimodal. Is that? I think that's maybe where the story begins when we really figure out how to teach this thing. It's something like it begins at PyMu PDF.
That's right.
Okay. If anybody has any other questions, we're happy to answer them real quick. But if not, Wiz, what are you most excited about with multimodal models in 2026?
I just am excited to finally be breaking into this. We've talked about it for a long time to start thinking about multimodal.
From the beginning.
Nice to be doing it. Nice to be doing it. There's a lot of ground to cover. There's an infinite amount of ground to cover, and I do think that we're seeing the space every week move closer and closer to some kind of omni, modal, just meaning all modalities. And that's exciting. In terms of like the specific models, Gemini's crushing it right now for every kind of multimodality task. I also think we're seeing more like workhorse multimodal models as opposed to just like toy generative models like Nano Banana, right? It's a fun model, but like we're not using it as part of this pipeline to ingest documents and answer questions. So it's exciting.
Yeah. And so like, why is it that we haven't covered multimodal till now? And what is it about LLMs? Does it signal a maturity? Does it signal a figured outness about the space that we're able to sort of move into this now? It feels to me like the reason why we didn't was because there was just so much to cover and so much happening, and maybe there is a maturity happening there that allows us to really use that as a platform now to extend into multimodal. How do you see it?
It took us a long time because there's a lot of background context that we have to cover, which means at some point we just have to do that.
Yeah.
And that takes away from the more exciting things that are constantly happening in the space to go back and say, and now here is how the model can see, right? But we have to start with that context or we're up a creek. And I think, we're just seeing that more data, more rich data is more better. And so including representations that aren't just text in training is helping models. I think as well, the expectation of the people using these technologies is that, of course, they can put an image into it, right? Because you can put images into ChatGPT, and therefore, we're shifting more into that modality. And ultimately, at the end of the road, why would we ever, except for cost savings or efficiency reasons, right? Why would we ever want just one modality in our models? We don't consume just one modality. We consume many modalities, and it makes us understand the world better. So why would we not want that for our models?
Even lawyers Even lawyers.
Even lawyers. That's freaking right.
What happens in the real world really matters, not just on the written page. Okay, that's a great way to end it. Happy Thanksgiving in the U.S. here, Wiz. Hope you enjoy your rest of your week off there in Canada. I know you guys already had yours, but happy holidays to everybody in the community as well. Thanks for your expertise today, Wiz.
You know it.
All right. And that is a wrap on today, the last one before the holiday. Next week, we're going to be covering Trinity. And Wiz is going to be calling in live with Lucas Atkins from NeurIPS. They're going to be doing at RC a big model drop on a brand new family of models. We're going to dig into the training pipeline. We're going to understand what's going on there. And look for more multimodal stuff coming from us in 2026. I'm quite excited to dig into the details technically behind the vision language models, behind the Omni models, and help you guys understand that stuff. It is something that we talked about including in the AI Engineering Bootcamp, and we decided against because it simply is too much to cover. So we're going to do it on YouTube with you guys for free instead. And so if you are trying to update your agent engineering game, definitely check out the AI Engineering Bootcamp. We do kick off in January, but there's a sale happening through Black Friday. If you get that challenge done, you can enroll for 25% off. That's the cheapest you're going to get all year. But thank you guys for joining us today for another Weekly Wednesday AI Makerspace YouTube live sesh. Always love you guys getting in the chat here. We'll be sure to answer all your questions next time. DFR Ramirez, thanks for coming today, guy, and thanks to everybody that have kind of been joining us throughout the year here as we head into the holiday season. We're not going to take next week off, but we'll take a couple weeks off here soon, and we appreciate your support as we continue down the path and on our mission to build the world's leading community for people like you who want to build, ship, and share production LLM applications. So till next time, keep building, shipping, and sharing, guys. We'll do the same. Have a very, very happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll see you soon.